Good day, everyone. We're now in lesson 2. We are the reporters of this topic, Igor Saisame S., Imperado Inalin M., Lorenzo Hans Daniel, and Darshano Shaya Hana Ara. But before we will start, I want you to know, or to say, or guess rather, what does these pictures means? Yes, this is sculpture. Today, we will discuss what is sculpture. For today's video, the learning outcomes at the end of the lesson, the students will be able to A. Define sculpture, B. Distinguish the different types of sculpture, C. Discuss elements of sculpture, and D. Demonstrate the skill in carving. What is a sculpture? The word sculpture originates from the Latin word sculpere, which means to carve. It is the art or practice of creating three-dimensional forms or figures. Well, it is easy to understand, ang sculpture daw is galing sa Latin word na sculpere, means to carve in English or mag-ukit in Tagalog. It is the art or practice of creating three-dimensional forms or figures. You know what is 3D, right? Which is holistically viewable. This is a three-dimensional forms of sculpture, where we can see all the sides, the back, the front, and the two sides of the sculpture or the object. That is what sculpture is, to carve and a practice of creating three-dimensional forms or figures. Sculptures can be freestanding or in the round, able to be viewed from all sides. As I said, this is an example of three-dimensional forms or freestanding, where we are able to see the whole side of the object and holistically able to appreciate the art. Or they can be in relief. In relief, this is an example of relief sculpture. In relief sculpture, rather, it is a form where it is carved or modeled from a flat background plane. Well, mo ni siya nga itong ginahimo, no? Like in the soap carving, it's an example of in relief sculpture. We cannot see the 360 view of the sculpture, but this is also a sculpture where it is carved from the hard materials. It is also sculpture, guys. So trivia lang, no? As we all know what is sculpture, the person who makes sculpture is called sculptor, and the sculpture is an art. That's the difference. I hope you get it. Next is the most enduring and arguably the greatest form of fine art known to man. Sculpture has made a major role in the evolution of Western culture. A. The most enduring and arguably the greatest form of fine art known to man, sculpture has played a major role in the evolution of Western culture. Why? Because sculpture gave us the opportunity to become more engaging. In addition of it is a 3D form of art that allows us to holistically appreciate the object. It is a key indicator of the cultural achievements of classical antiquity and became an important influence in the development of Renaissance art in Italy. Sculpture art is an effective art in giving us a message. It tells us stories. It enables us to showcase a history of one's place. That is why it has great contribution of Renaissance art development in Italy before. So makita dyan nato no nga, ato mabantayan nga ang mga art, sculptures, paintings, or unsa pa ba na kind of art sa Italy before in the Renaissance period. It is an art where it expresses a history. It showcases the past. No, dako jud tabang pod ang sculpture. Even today, although continuously evolving, sculpture is still the leading method of expressing and commemorating both historical figures and events. During its history, it has attracted some of the world's greatest artists. So, while na popular in sculpture, many people kay na attract ani nga sculptures and nakakreate sila og artistic kind of art like Phidias, Myron of Eleutherae, Politos, Scopas, Lysippus, Praxiteles, and Leocharis, as well as Donatello from 1386 to 1466, Michelangelo 1475 to 1654, and many more. These artists are able to express what they feel, as well as to showcase what their history is all about before. The works of these artists can be found in many of the best art museums. For example, the Accademia Gallery Museum in Florence, where we are able to view the Michelangelo's work of art. As I said, this is Michelangelo, and these are one of examples in his sculpture art. Very creative, right? Full of information. We have now a new slide, the ever-expanding art form. Why? Because the definition or meaning of sculpture has widened a great deal during the 20th century. With the development of new sculptural tools and technology, contemporary works now employ such a huge variety of new materials, techniques, and spatial schemes of reference that sculpture is no longer a fixed term, which refers to a fixed category of objects or creative activities, but rather an ever-expanding art form that is constantly evolving and redefining itself. Or in simple words, as time goes by, we are able to develop how we live. We became more technologically advanced. So, the sculpture art ay wala po siya nagpahuli sa development. It aims to redefine itself. The advancement of the world helps the sculpture to upgrade what it is used to be. Later on, we will be enlightened what does upgrade ang nahitabo sa sculpture. Definition of traditional sculpture. Traditional sculpture prior to the 20th century had four main defining characteristics. First, it was the only three-dimensional art form. Second, it was representational. When we said representational, it represents what it represents. For example, a banana sculpture inspired from banana fruit. Third, it was viewed as an art of solid form. Sculpture daw kay makita nimo siya gikan sa solid form like wax, clay, wood, mud, and many more. Fourth, traditional sculptors used only two main techniques, carving or modeling. The models for traditional sculpting derive from Greek and Roman sculpture of classical antiquity. Basic form of sculpture now outdated. Yes, tama siya. Ma-outdate ang sculpture. Mas akong giging kagaina as time evolves, as there is development, slowly development in the world, sculpture is able to abide that development too. Previously, the history of art understood only two basic sculptural forms, sculpture in the round or reliefs. So, dati daw na lang duha ka klase, basic na sculpture. Katong around, katong ma-viewed 360, or in relief, katong like example sa soap carving. But nowadays, there are new forms of sculpture. Light-related sculptures and mobile sculptures necessitate our definition of possible forms. The next slide is the examples of light-related sculpture and mobile sculpture for you to become more enlightened. This is a 3D hologram. Mobile sculpture this is its example. So when we say light-related sculpture, it came from the light bulbs, the sun, the laser beams as the primary medium of expression. As we can see, wala na dyan siya nagamit of clay, wax, or woods as a medium of carving here, no? Mo ni siya ang technologically advanced sculpture. Mobile sculpture is not literally mobile kanato ni a cell phone, but it means an abstract sculpture that has moving parts due to wings or motors. Creative, no? Beautiful. Next is definition of modern and contemporary sculpture. The art of sculpture is no longer restricted by traditional sculptural concepts, meaning wala na lang siya naglimit kung unsa siya dati. Materials na gigamit o ang methods of productions kay nausab na pud siya. It is no longer exclusively representational but frequently wholly abstract. Nor is it purely solid and static. It may reference empty space in an important way and can also be kinetic and capable of movement. Easy to understand. Dili na daw siya naka-stay put lang. Finally, as well as being carved or modeled, it can be assembled, glued, projected, or constructed in a wide variety of ways. As a result, the traditional four-point meaning and definition of sculpture no longer applies. Definition and meaning of sculpture today. The sheer diversity of 21st century, plastic art has left us with only one defining characteristic, three-dimensionality. Thus, the current definition of sculpture is something like this. Sculpture is the only branch of visual arts that is specifically concerned with expressive three-dimension form. Simple. After all the developments of sculpture as time evolves, there is only one thing that remains what sculpture is. Sculpture is still remained a 3D form of art. No, biskan pa upgrade or na level up ang sculpture today, it still able us to showcase the three-dimension view of an object. Basic sculptural techniques. First is modeling. Is the process of manipulating soft materials that can be shaped by the sculptor's hands to create a three-dimensional forms. Because the artist adds materials to build the sculpture, modeling is an additive process. Media for modeling include clay, plaster, paper mache, and wax. We, the one who makes the sculptures, the ability to create a form by using our hands. Sama ani, si artist, kay ginahulman niya ang wax or clay ba ni gamit ang iyang hands to create a new form. Modeling is an additive process, meaning ang soft materials is worked by the artist to build up a shape or forms. As diba, our body heat will serve to soften the clay or wax, making it easier for us to create new face or new smooth for faces rather. Muna siya ang example sa modeling. Modeling kay nagamit siya og hands. Nagapress-press lang ng modeling, guys. Next is carving. Dating from prehistoric times, carving is a process in which the artist subtracts or cuts away a solid material to reach the desired form. Simple, ang carving daw is ang pagtanggal sa other parts sa clay, wax, or woods to create a form. Para sa ani, nagtanggal siya para makahimo siya og 3D nga ear or realistic ear. Because the artist subtracts to reveal the sculpture, carving is a subtractive process whereby materials is systematically or purposely eliminated or cuts from the materials. Sa masanggingon, subtractive process, kay nagtanggal man ta, that is why it's called subtractive process. It can be a very painstaking and time-consuming method because of its unforgiving nature. One piece is carved off the solid form, it cannot be put back. So lisod jud daw kaya ni carving no kay aside sa sakit ni siya na or hassle ni siya nga class nga style sa pag-sculpture, paghimog sculpture, kuan pa ni siya kanang tricky. Kung imo na siyang natanggal sa soap, sa wax, sa wood, dili na nimo siya mabalik, no? Kailangan perfect yun yung pagtanggal para dili ka mamali-mali. So that is where my discussion will end. The next reporter will discuss what is casting. Thank you for listening, guys.
Hi, I'm Shahana Arasi Garshana from Group 6, and today I'm going to discuss the two basic sculptural techniques, which are casting and construction and assemblage. The other two types are going to be discussed by Ms. Igor. So first, we're going to discuss casting. Casting is the method of making a mold and casting it in a durable material such as bronze. It is also a process by which a liquid material is usually poured into a mold, which contains a hollow cavity of desired shape and then allowed to solidify. So, when we say casting, kay kuan na siya kanang nakay kanang gamiton nga molder, which is makita nato sa next page o kaning sa above nga picture kaning akong butang diri sa kaning nga page. So, magamit ka og kanang liquid material o bronze ba kanang gipainitan na siya nga bronze tapos na mahimo siyang liquid. So kanang liquid i-pour na nimo siya dito sa molder. Pag pour nimo sa molder, pag bugnaw ana, ma-pour man na siya og kanang sculpture. So ang mga example ana makita nato sa next page. So if natay kanang gusto nga shape or kanang sabi gusto nato dira nga formation, kung natay molder, kaya nang gusto nato og apple, i-pour lang nato to atong liquid material sa katong molder or sa katong hulmahanan, to ba hulmahanan, pag kuha na siya, pag uga na siya nya, pag buwak nimo or kanang pag break nimo anang molder, pag tanggal nimo, kuha na siya, mahimo na siya og katong shape, katong gusto nimo nga shape. So mao na siya ang casting. The two most commonly used methods of casting are sand casting and cyperdew or lost wax. Sand casting refers to the process of making a mold in sand by digging a pattern into it and pouring molten metal, such as metal or wax, into the mold, waiting for the molten material to harden, and then removing the cast from the sand. So, kung may nutag sand casting, ang atong hulmahanan nga gamiton kay sand. So, mao lang gyapon nato nga process, i-pour lang nimo ang kanang atong material or kanang metal na kanang natunaw na dito sa molder. Pagka nato, pag mugahi na siya, mapurma na siya. So, ang gamiton lang diri ang kanang hulmahanan is sand. So, lost wax refer to the process of creating the sculpture form in wax, then covering the wax with a ceramic shell, then pouring molten metal into the ceramic shell, and then breaking off the ceramic shell once the metal has cooled. So, sa lost wax, ang gamiton na nga molder is wax. So, sa word pa lang, wax, lost wax is, ang gamiton siya nga molder is wax. So, ang example ani, pareha tong kanang apple, katong nasa picture nako, nagibutang nako siya sa PPT. Mo to siya ang example sa lost wax. So, makita mo na to, ang gigamit dito ang nga hulmahanan kay dili sand kundi wax. So ang giba to ceramic shell sa mga tuno. Pagkaman ibuta pour to nimo ang same process lang gyapon pero lahi lang ang gigamit nga molder. So pag ma-cool na siya kung unsay imong desired nga shape, mao ang mulabas. The fourth basic sculptural technique is construction and assemblage. Emerging in the 20th century, the techniques of assemblage and construction consist of combining and joining various material to form a three-dimensional object. This method originated from the technique collage, which was popularized by Cubists during the early part of the 20th century, in which artists cut and pasted pre-existing materials to create their art. Assemblage often includes combining pre-existing or found objects to create the sculpture. So, ang ikapat na ito nga sculptural technique is construction and assemblage. So, kani siya, makita, nagamit ko gatag ng example na picture, which is makita na to sa slides. So, kani siya, pareha nang makikita tag magamit og kanang mga newspaper, kanang magamit og mga kanang nagamit ng materials, kanang pre-existing materials, tapos gamito na to na sila, i-paste na to hangtod makahimo tag three-dimensional nga sculpture. So, naagay pa mga example nato dira sa atong PPT. So, yung ana siya ang construction and assemblage. Elements and principles of sculpture. Line is the path of moving point. In sculpture, the most important kind of line is contour line, or the outline that form the edges of the sculptures to create its silhouette. If the sculpture is composed of one solid form, the silhouette will be solid. If the sculpture is composed of multiple forms or has empty space within it, the silhouette will be more complex with more contour line creating. So, nata example na sa next slide, which is katong mga shapes nga daghan kaayo o katong isa lang, katong tao lang siya. So, ana diri ang kung ang sculpture daw kay composed lang daw siya of one solid form, the silhouette will be solid. So, kung ang sculpture po siya, kung daghan po siya multiple forms, para katong sa, ganun ipakita na ko sa next slide, katong mga cube-cube nga na formation, di na siya cube, pero na siya kanang slight curve na shape. So, ingon siya, mas complex, mas complex siya nga, mas, ang ipakita niya nga silhouette kay mas complex kay tungod kay daghan siya formation, daghan siya mga kailangan daghan contour lang i-create. So, mao na siya ang ato ang principles and elements of sculpture. Characteristics of contour lines include width, thick, thin, length, long, short, direction, horizontal, vertical, perpendicular, parallel, radial, focus, sharp, blurry, filling, sharp, graceful, smooth. So, kani siya ang characteristic of contour line. So, if makita mo dito na ng mga sculpture naman sila gamay nga, nagdepende lang contour line sa kabagaon, sa kanipison, sa katason, sa kamove-on, sa kung horizontal ba siya or diagonal, kung blurry ba siya or kanang zigzag ba iyahang kanang texture, something, pero characteristic siya sa tuwang contour line. Kung sharp ba siya or curve or zigzag mo itong yung ganiha. So, natin example dira sa, nagapon tayo example ana sa PPT na to. So, form in space. A form is three-dimensional. It has height, width, and thickness. Because sculptures are by nature space occupying and three-dimensional, they are forms. While less knowledgeable viewers may refer to sculptures as having shape, in reality they have form. Shapes are flat or two-dimensional forms, or three-dimensional. Two types of forms: geometric form, or forms with names such as spheres, cube, cylinder, cone, and pyramid, and organic forms, or irregular forms with no names that maybe appear to have grown from nature. So, nata example aning sa form na to, sa ato ang three-dimensional form, katong giingon, kung kuan ba siya, kung kaning nata example sa geometric form o sa organic form, nagapon siya sa atong PPT. So, when we say geometric form, kanang sphere, kanang cube, ano naman nato na siya ang mga form ngayon ana sa, I'm sure familiar na siya sa ato kanang mga words, sphere, cubes. Next is ang atong organic forms or irregular forms, wala siya kuan nga formation para ng leaf, kanang makita nato sa nature, mo na siya sa. Next is space. It refers to the area between, around, above, below, or within elements in work of art. Positive space is a part of the work that is filled with subject matter, the actual physical forms making up sculpture. Negative space is the empty space around and or above, below, or within the sculpture. All sculptures have negative space around them. Only sculpture with hollows and void within them have negative space intermixed with the positive space within the form of sculpture. So when we say negative space, nata example dira ka ng form bitaw siya sa tao pero naa siya hollow diri sa iyahang kanang chest, ay diri sa diri nga area, diri nga part sa chest. So mo na to example sa negative space. Tapos pag kuan na po kung positive space po siya, we filled with subject matter, actual physical forms. So, itong example na katong kanang nag-bend siya nga formation sa tao, kanatong example sa positive space.
Good day everyone, I'm Inalin Emperado. Today we're going to tackle about balance and orientation. So, we have two aspects of balance and orientation. First, the sculpture must have actual physical stability. So, may tag physical stability, tibay siya, na siya kadugayon. Pareha, this is example of sculpture. So, this example, the second aspect of balance is proportional, that is having to do with schematic, whether looks good or not. So, ang akong pagsabutan ni, kusog siyag appeal, kusog siyag appeal, although na pangit ba siya or nindot, basta dali lang siya ma-appreciate sa tao. So, three main types of balance. So, natay tulo ka mean of balance. So, first is symmetric balance and asymmetric balance and radial balance. So, this is an example of symmetric balance. So, ang asymmetric balance, pareha siya. Kung unsa ang pag-drawing sa pikas, mapod sa pikas. Then, ang asymmetric balance, ano siya different. Sa pikas, lahi siya. Then, sa pikas, lahi po, dili siya kantay. So, mana siya ang example of symmetric balance and asymmetric balance. Ang ikatulo kay radial balance. So, kung may radial balance, both sides pareha siya. Mo nang example sa kuan ang pagdrawing sa bulak. So kailangan pare-pareha siya kay para dali ra siya ma-appreciate ug nindot siya pagkabuhat. So next, scale and prepulsion. Prepulsion refers to how to big each part of the sculpture is relative to others part of using prepulsion different. So this is an example of prepulsion. Prepulsion, so ang akong gi-example dire bula. So kung mag-drawing tag bula, kailangan pantay jud siya kung unsa pag-drawing sa baba, mao pud sa baba, din sa pag-drawing sa kilid, mao pud sa kilid kay para dili siya pangit pagkabuhat kay kintahi kung dili siya mapantay, maublong siya or dili lain na kay tan-awon. So mo na siya ang example of proportion. Ang sculpture refers to its size relative to the size of a surrounding environment. So this is an example of scale. Kanang dali ra siya ma-appreciate. Ang example nako ani kaning ang rat, mas dako pa ang rat kaysa sa tao. So art gyapon na siya, matawag gyapon na siya og art. So kung i-combine ang proportion of scale, dali ra gyud siya ma-appreciate sa tao, dali ra ma-feel sa tao na nindot gyud siya pagkakuan pag mag-uban ang proportion og scale. So next, texture. First, the real texture. So real texture is actual surface quality of the work of art, how to actual sculpture would feel like if you touch it. So ang real textures, tinuod siya pagkabuhat, then ang pagkabuhat ko niya with feelings. Feel na ko ang real texture mo gikapi lang siya sa uban, pero ang pagbuhat niya kanang naa siya, ang pagbuhat niya with feelings gyud. So mao na akong pagsabot sa real texture. Ang implied textures kanang more lang siya og illusion, nag-illusionate siya pagbuhat sa art. So iyahang sarili niya ang pagbuhat sa art, wala niya gikapi sa uban, ang iyaha lang gigamit ang iyang illusion. So next, light, value, and color. So value is the light of darkness of color. Artists create the different value of color by mixing the shade and tint. So mag-drawing ta, so kailangan jud na value para nindot ang atong pagka-draw. So kung mag-drawing ta dili mapantay ang color sa imong gidrawing, so pangit jud siya, wala siya value. So kailangan ipantay nato ang light, ang color para nindot siya tan-awon. That's all for my presentation about balance and orientation. Thank you.
Color is the way light waves are absorbed or reflected by everything around us, while light consists of all the colors mixed together. A rainbow is white light that is broken apart by the moisture in the air. The way we see the colors of an object depends on how it absorbs and or reflects light. So, during a situation, mukhang dito na kita ka ng mga tao na siya different kanang kalailahian sa pagtanaw sa kabutang. For like example, para sa kuha, ang kaning butang is pink. Para sa kuha, kaning butang is pink, which is pink jud ang iyang color. But kung ipatanong nato siya sa mga tao na blind color sila, which is ang pink na ang pagtanaw sa kabutang is pink, which is ang pagtanaw po nila is purple. Isa man ako example. So diri pero na po ibang tao na pink iyang pananaw, pero kung masipyat siya, mura makita siya purple. Kaya nagadepende mo good ang pananaw nato sa usa ka color tungod kay nagadepende po siya sa lightning. Kung ang lightning device murag nakapahatag og changes siya ang color, which is even na pink siya, mas kung maigo siya sa lightning or light, murag mo reflect ito murag siya purple. So nagpag-report ko ana kaya sakay malipat po sa open color, which labi na murag mahayagan siya. So artists use the color wheel to organize visually how our eyes interpret colors when we use them in different combination. So labi na kanang sa mga how to painting, di ba? Makita ko sila na how di sila mag-combine og color. Para dagan na color na ginag-combine nila. Abi na to kanang pangit ang kalabasan. Pero pag combine na di pag combine, hindot ang kalabasan sa color na mahimo nila kay labi na sa mga artists how sila unsaon pag-interpret sa mga colors na ginahatag nila, mga different combination silang colors, daga kasi black, may yellow, may pink, may orange. Pag ilahan ng isagol, ang kalabasan anak nindot jud siya, hindi siya color. Pero kita dili mo mga artists, tag two colors lang jud ta. So in sculpture, artists must consider not only the values in colors they choose to put within the form of sculpture itself, but also how the value in color sculpture relate to its environment. Without enough value or a color contrast between sculpture and its environment, viewers will not notice the artwork. So diri is ang mga artists daw gina-consider po dili lang kay gina-consider nila ang values in colors kung unsa ibutang nila para ma-form ang ilahang sculpture. Labi na kanang sculpta. Iko ato kung mag-sculpta, di ba? Dili lang jud ta nagka-base lang kung unsay value sa iyang color, di ba? Unsay nagka-base po ta kung unsay kalabasan sa sculpt nato ang kung unsay kalabasan sa tuong sculpt. So kung giunsa pa nato siya panghimo na. Movement and emphasis. Movement is art has two different definition, the arrangement of visual elements to calm the viewer's eyes to move over the artwork in a specific direction, sequence, or pattern. B. The illusion of motion is a space of art. Sculpture with a strong use of movement will guide the viewer's eyes throughout the entire piece. Meanwhile, a sculpture with the illusion of motion will give the viewer a sense that the form is the sculpture in the sculpture is dynamic, moving as opposed to static still. So, like for example, aning image na akong indicate sa kuang visual. For example, mo ni ako ang sculpt kanang image na nakita nimo dira ka. So sa kuang sculpt, ma-identify nimo ang ang sculpture by its movement. Kung kanday ka na akong scalp, ma-identify mo ako ang scalp na isa siya sa na wave siya, wave. While ang ma-identify mo ang isa ka scalp by identifying kung unsa siya, wave ba siya or bird ang pag-scalp. Then while ang illusion of motion, mo ni siya ang kung masense nimo kung unsa lang naadra sa imong scalp. Kung like anang akong giskuan, ako ang gihatag na image na nasa ko ang visual, which is ang wave. Masense nimo na kana na scalp di ay is wave. From hatag to lain example, say mo scalp ta og bird. Then masense na to ang pag-scalp nako, masense na to ang scalp nako, which is ang bird na naglupad. Mo na siya ang illusion of motion. Masense nimo kung unsa ang movement, kung unsa ang unsay definition sa imong scalp. Ang definition ng scalp is ang bird na akong scalp, which is mura siya naglupad. Next is emphasis refers to the creation of focal points. So as you can see in the image of in my visual, makita jud nimo even na balance sila hang pag-paint sa pag-draw, same sila flower, but kay tungod kay focal points na siya, so makita jud nimo ang kalahian. Even same sila og structure, same sila og kanang paghimo tungod upat ka flowers, but kung ato ayo siya i-focus, mas ma-attract ta sa red flower. So mao na siya ang ginatawag na focal points. Kay even same sila og structure, ang wavelength, ang balance sa pag-draw, but the focal points is ang maka-attract sa tukang eyes. For example, aning gihatan ako na image sa ako ang visual, mas makahatag, mas na nindot sila og pag-paint. Pero mas na-attract ko sa red flower. So for example sa mga butang. For example, kani siya na butang is ang suga. So, ibuka na to, diba? Same sila balance sa dominance, sa ilahang weight, same sila kung giun sa paghimo sa side by side. But kung i-focus nato ni siya, kung tanaw nato ni siya na object, kung i-focus nato siya, mas na-attract ta diri sa front. Mas na-attract ta kay ganun taas na ka is diri, para asa man ni? Kasi purpose ani na mas init mo ta na wala ni sa front, mas init mo ta wala ni kay okay naman ta siya diri, mas nakahatag naman siya attractive. But kung ato siya gusto gadon, mas even unsa kanindot ang naa sa iyang side by side, mas ma-focus nato sa tuang mata diri agad sa front. Kung unsa jud purpose ani niya. So ang kaning purpose ani ginasaksat ay gina-connect ni siya dito gina-connect ni siya para masita ni ang naa sa kilid. So mao na siya. Pattern in writing. Pattern is the repetition of elements within a piece of art, forms, or colors. For example, the principle of pattern is closely related to several other principles of design, movement, unity, emphasis, rhythm, and balance. Thus, when analyzing the principle of patterns in a piece of art, one must also consider how pattern relates to other principles in design are at work in the piece. So as you can see, the image below, makita jud nimo ang pattern niya. Though alternate ang iyang colors, but same form, but the same siya of forms, ang forma like ana. Pero kung tutukan jud nimo siya, naa jud siya movement. Naa jud siya totally ang movement niya, ang balance, ang unity kung asa padulong isa na dito pud padulong ang uban. Na. Kani siya ginahimo ni sa artist tungod kay gusto nila ipahiwatig sa tuha kung unsa jud ang pasabot ana. Kung para sa ko ang pasabot ana is naa na dira ang unity sa usa ka form. Kung di ba ang form dira is more siya patak sa tubig. Na kung unsay dagan sa usa ka butang mo pud na ang sundon sa uban. So dito siya tan-aw din sa sakit sa mata kay tungod one direction lang ang dagan sa or ang flow sa movement niya. So contrast. Contrast refers to the juxtaposition of forms, objects, textures, values, or color to stress the differences between them. Value contrast is the noticeable difference between the shades, dark values, and the tints, light values within a single form or within a piece of art as a whole. Color contrast is the differences between warm and cold colors. Artists also use textures and objects to create powerful side-by-side comparison. Contrast makes art eye-catching, reinforces the illusion of dimension and space, and directs attention to focal points. So, nanadiri atanan, ang ako ang gipang discuss ganina. So, nag-mix na siya. So, as you can see, makita sa image na akong gi-indicate sa akong visual, makita nimo ang different contrast, different textures, and different focal points. So, para sa kuha, sa first image is, para sa kuha, kuhaan siya, medyo nagsagol ang dark, ang warm and ang light color. So diri sa front, sa ikaduha, cool siya tungod kay cool color siya para sa kuha tungod light siya. Medyo nindot siya pabamura siya fresh kay siya tan-awon sa kuha mata. While ang the last image is dark. So murag init kay siya sa kuha mata, igang ana. So kani ipakita na ko ni siya na ipakita na ko siya na image for you and for us to know na kung sa yun ay kalahian sa matag color o sa different textures nga nahimo or naadra sa object na powerful kay ang color pa kay tungod kay even color lang ang pagpaint nato murag makahatag jud siya og kanang object like ana kahoy na patay na naasa murag bukid-bukid mangguro na even kana lang iyahang pagpaint dagan kay siya og kanang definition dagan kay murag dagang tao na makahatag og lahi na opinion kung unsay pasabot ana na image labi na sa mga artists labi na sa mga naghimo ana na painting na siya. And for that mao lang ako ang last topic and thank you.